The security footage on my phone proved everything I believed about Ronan was a lie. He didn't care about art. He cared about appearances. On the small screen, I saw her, Lenny, standing on the main stage under the dim work lights. She was delivering a monologue, and even through the grainy, silent video, I could feel her power. Then I saw him, Ronan Graves, walking out from the wings. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't in awe. He was yelling. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the fury on his face. He grabbed her by the arm, a girl half his size, and dragged her toward the stage door. He shoved her out into the rainy alley and pointed a finger in her face before slamming the heavy door shut. It's amazing what people will do when they think no one is watching. They show you their real face. The world is full of people who talk about giving others a chance, but when that chance shows up looking hungry and scared, they lock the door. It's a hard lesson to learn. I hope you're all doing okay out there. Let me know where you're from in the comments. I'm sitting here on a quiet night, and it's got me thinking. My name is Denzel Washington. This story isn't about a movie I made. This is the story of how I had to become invisible to find the most powerful voice I'd ever heard. It's the story of how I went from a man who had lost his faith in acting to a man who risked everything for one young actress nobody else could see. But let me start from the beginning. It began with the feeling of being a ghost in my own life. I'd be at a premiere, smiling for cameras, and I'd feel nothing. I'd hold a new script, and the words felt like dust. The fire that had made me an actor, the thing that made me feel alive, was gone. I was famous, but I felt like a fraud. In a desperate attempt to find that feeling again, I bought the old August Wilson Theater. It was a beautiful wreck, full of history and shadows. I thought if I could just breathe the same air as the legends who had performed there, maybe I could remember who I used to be. I hired a hotshot artistic director named Ronan Graves. He was ambitious and smooth. He said all the right things about finding new, authentic voices. I wanted to believe him, but I knew you don't find authenticity from a leather chair in a high-rise office. You find it on the floor. So I hatched a plan. I told Ronan I was taking a sabbatical, going off the grid to write my memoirs or something. He bought it completely. The next day, I came as Dan, just Dan, the new janitor. No one gave me a second glance. I was just the guy who cleaned the toilets and emptied the trash. And from that spot, I could see everything. I watched Ronan run his auditions. He was looking for a star for the theater's big reopening production of Fences. He'd flatter actors who came from wealthy families or had famous agents. But the moment an unknown actor, someone nervous and hungry, walked on stage, he'd turn cold. He wasn't looking for talent, he was looking for a brand. Being a janitor teaches you to notice the little things, the things everyone else is too busy to see. A few days into my new job, while I was cleaning out the orchestra pit, I found a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Next to it was a small bird carved out of a piece of scrap wood. It was beautifully done. I showed it to one of the stagehands. "Probably rats," he said, not even looking. "Or worse, homeless people trying to sneak in. Keep an eye out." But I knew a rat didn't carve wood. Someone was here. Someone was hiding in the dark corners of my theater. The clock was ticking. The theater was burning through money. Ronan had 1 month to cast the lead actress, or the board of directors, who reported directly to me, not that he knew that, was going to pull funding for the season. The pressure was making him mean. He'd walk around barking orders, treating the crew like they were dirt on his shoes. He'd walk right past me, complaining on his phone about how hard it was to find real talent, while I was scrubbing a floor he'd just scuffed with his expensive shoes. I started looking for more signs. A candy wrapper here, a smudged footprint there. I felt like a detective in my own building. I knew I wasn't just chasing a ghost. One night, after everyone had gone home, I was doing a final walkthrough. I heard a noise from the upper levels, a soft scraping sound. I followed it up to a section of the balcony that was closed for repairs. Behind a stack of old set pieces, I found a small service door I'd never noticed before. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. It led to a tiny, forgotten storage room, and inside, my heart stopped. There was a makeshift bed made of old stage curtains. On a dusty crate next to it were 3 more of those little carved wooden birds, and stacked beside them were plays: Shakespeare, August Wilson, Tennessee Williams. The pages were filled with notes, questions, ideas. They were the notes of a brilliant mind, someone who wasn't just reading the plays, but wrestling with them. Someone was living inside my theater. My first thought was fear, then curiosity. Who was this person? I backed out of the room, closing the door quietly. As I turned to leave, I heard it, a voice. It was floating up from the stage below, a girl's voice filled with a quiet strength. I hurried down the stairs, my steps silent. I crept behind the back curtain and peered through a small gap. There she was, a young girl, standing center stage, lit only by the single ghost light. She was rail thin, with tired eyes, but when she spoke, the entire theater seemed to hold its breath. She was performing a scene from Hamlet, playing both parts, shifting her voice and body seamlessly. It was raw, it was real, and it was utterly devastating. It was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. And I knew in that single moment that I had found the authentic voice Ronan had been searching for. She was right here, all along, hidden in plain sight. I stayed hidden in the wings, my hand covering my mouth. I'd seen acting that was good, acting that was great, but this was different. This was survival. She wasn't performing a part, she was bleeding it. When she finished, the silence in the theater was heavy, like a held breath. She stood there for a long moment, just a small shape in the dim light. Then she seemed to shrink back into herself, the power draining away, leaving a tired, hungry-looking kid. She scurried off the stage and disappeared into the shadows. I didn't follow her, not then. What would I say? I'm the owner of this place, and by the way, I'm also Denzel Washington? She'd run so fast she'd leave a cartoon-shaped hole in the wall. No, I was Dan the janitor, and Dan wouldn't do that. So I went back to my supply closet and made a sandwich, peanut butter and jelly. I took a bottle of water from the small fridge. I walked back up to the little service door and left them right outside, where she would have to see them. I didn't knock, I didn't leave a note. I just left the food and walked away. The next morning, the food and water were gone. This became our routine. Every night, I would find a quiet place to listen. She would come out onto the stage when she thought the building was empty, and she would work. Some nights, it was monologues. Other nights, she would just move, feeling the space, owning it in a way Ronan's hand-picked actors never could. She had a presence that filled every seat, even when they were all empty. After she retreated to her hiding spot, I'd leave food and water by the door. One night, I decided to take a small risk. I left the sandwich and water, and next to it, I placed a worn paperback copy of Fences. It was my own copy, full of my notes from years ago. I didn't write anything in it. I just left it there. For 2 days, nothing happened. The food was taken, but the book remained. I thought maybe I had scared her off, pushed too hard. Then, on the 3rd night, I found the book back outside her door. When I picked it up, a small piece of folded paper fell out. I opened it. There were only 4 words, written in shaky pencil. Rose's lines are better. I laughed out loud in the empty hallway. It was the first sign of the fighter in her. She wasn't just reading it, she was challenging it, challenging me. The next day, I was mopping the lobby when Ronan came striding in. He was on the phone as usual, talking loudly about some investor. He looked right through me like I was a piece of furniture. But then he stopped, hung up the phone, and turned to me. "Dan, right?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "You do good work. The place looks clean, really clean," he said, giving me a smile that seemed genuine. "It's important. We're not just putting on a play here, we're building a temple to the art. Every detail matters, from the lights on the marquee to the shine on this floor." He clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a part of that. Don't forget it." For a moment, I saw the man I thought I had hired. The man who cared about the details, who believed in the mission. It felt good. It made me think that maybe I was being too hard on him. Maybe he just needed to find the right person to remind him what real talent looked like. Maybe that person was Lenny. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was looking for a star, and she was hiding under his roof. That night, I saw her. Not on the stage, but in the hall near my closet. She was trying to get a drink from a water fountain that I knew was broken. She looked exhausted, her clothes worn and thin. "That one doesn't work," I said, my voice soft so I wouldn't startle her. She jumped back, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to bolt. "It's okay," I said, holding up my hands. "I'm Dan, the janitor." She just stared at me, her body tense. "You're the one leaving the food," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "You look hungry." Her jaw tightened. "I'm fine." "Okay," I said, not wanting to push. "Well, I was just about to have my dinner. I always make too much." I pulled a brown paper bag from my cart. "Ham and cheese, if you want it." I set it down on a nearby bench and started to walk away, to give her space. "Why?" she asked, her voice quiet. I stopped and turned back. "Why what? Why are you being nice to me?" The question hung in the air between us. It was a simple question, but it told me everything about her life. It told me kindness was something she didn't trust. "You have a gift," I said honestly. "I hear you on the stage sometimes. I used to be an actor a long time ago. A gift like that, it needs to be fed." A flicker of something crossed her face. Not trust, not yet, but maybe a little less fear. She looked down at the bag, then back at me. She didn't say thank you. She just gave me a tiny, almost invisible nod. That was more than enough. I told her about the open auditions for Fences. I told her Ronan Graves was looking for a fresh face to play Rose. I saw the spark in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that old fear. "He'd never see me," she whispered. "Look at me." "He's looking for an actor," I said, my voice firm, "not a set of clothes. He's a smart man. He'll see the talent. All you have to do is get on that stage. Let him see what I see." I believed it. I really did. I believed in the power of the art. I thought if Ronan could just see what she could do for 1 minute, all the other stuff wouldn't matter. It took me another week to convince her. I talked to her about the character of Rose, about her strength and her pain. I saw Lenny connect with it. It was her story, in a way. A story of being fenced in, of loving something that didn't always love you back. The day of the final auditions, she was a wreck. She was hiding in the upper balcony, watching the parade of polished, confident actresses walk across the stage. "I can't do it, Dan," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't belong here." "You belong on that stage more than any of them," I told her, my voice full of a conviction I hoped would be contagious. "Just go down there. Don't say a word. Just walk to the center of the stage and start. He'll see." I believed it. I really did. I believed in the power of the art. I thought if Ronan could just see what she could do for 1 minute, all the other stuff wouldn't matter. It took me another week to convince her. I talked to her about the character of Rose, about her strength and her pain. I saw Lenny connect with it. It was her story in a way. A story of being fenced in, of loving something that didn't always love you back. The day of the final auditions, she was a wreck. She was hiding in the upper balcony, watching the parade of polished, confident actresses walk across the stage. "I can't do it, Dan," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't belong here." "You belong on that stage more than any of them," I told her, my voice full of a conviction I hoped would be contagious. "Just go down there. Don't say a word. Just walk to the center of the stage and start. He'll see." I believed it. I really did. I believed in the power of the art. I thought if Ronan could just see what she could do, for 1 minute, all the other stuff wouldn't matter. It took me another week to convince her. I talked to her about the character of Rose, about her strength and her pain. I saw Lenny connect with it. It was her story in a way, a story of being fenced in, of loving something that didn't always love you back. The day of the final auditions, she was a wreck. She was hiding in the upper balcony, watching the parade of polished, confident actresses walk across the stage. "I can't do it, Dan," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't belong here." "You belong on that stage more than any of them," I told her, my voice full of a conviction I hoped would be contagious. "Just go down there. Don't say a word. Just walk to the center of the stage and start. He'll see." I watched from the shadows as she finally did it. She walked down the long aisle, her steps small but determined. She climbed the stairs to the stage. Ronan was sitting in the 5th row, looking bored and irritated. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Excuse me? Auditions are over. Can someone get her out of here?" he called out to an empty room. Lenny didn't look at him. She just walked to her spot, took a deep breath, and began. I couldn't stay. It felt like I was tempting fate. I had to believe that Ronan would see the truth, that he would prove my faith in him was not a mistake. I went to my closet and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. An hour passed. Then 2. I started to worry. I finally left my little room and went looking for her. Her hiding spot was empty. The old curtains she used as a bed were tossed aside. The little wooden birds were gone. My copy of Fences was on the dusty crate, torn in half. A cold dread washed over me. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I rushed to the small security office in the basement. I knew the password to the system. I pulled up the footage from the main stage camera, my hand shaking as I rewound the timeline. And that's when I saw it. I watched her stand on that stage, and even on the small, silent screen, I saw her give the performance of a lifetime. I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought me to my knees. This was it. This was the moment. Then I saw Ronan. He walked onto the stage, not with a look of awe, but with a face like thunder. I saw him yelling, his finger jabbing at the air. I saw him grab her arm. I saw him drag my girl, this brilliant, brave girl, across the stage. He shoved open the heavy side door and threw her out into the rain-soaked alley. He pointed a finger in her face, a final, cruel gesture, and then slammed the door shut, leaving her in the dark. He hadn't seen a star. He had only seen a homeless girl, and he had thrown her away like she was trash. He had betrayed the theater. He had betrayed the art. And in that moment, I realized he had betrayed me. My hands clenched into fists. I had wanted to believe in him. I had wanted to believe that talent was enough, but it wasn't. And the man I had trusted with my dream had just turned it into a nightmare. I slammed the laptop shut. The rage was a hot stone in my gut. For a second, I forgot who I was supposed to be. I wasn't Dan the janitor. I was Denzel Washington, and a man I had hired had just assaulted a child in my building. My first instinct was to storm up to Ronan's office, kick the door off its hinges, and fire him so fast his head would spin. But what would that accomplish?
He'd call security. A janitor losing his mind? They'd toss me out right behind Lenny. And worse, what would happen to her? The story would leak. Homeless teen discovered by Denzel Washington. She'd become a spectacle, a media curiosity. Her talent would be buried under a mountain of pity and headlines. She would never get a fair shot. Her life would be defined by that one story. No, Dan had to handle this. I grabbed my thin jacket and ran out of the security office, my heart pounding against my ribs. The rain was coming down harder now, cold and angry. The alley was dark, slick with grime. The single bare bulb above the stage door cast a sickly yellow light on the wet pavement. I called her name, my voice swallowed by the city sounds. "Lenny!" Nothing, just the hiss of rain on dumpsters. I walked deeper into the alley, my eyes scanning the shadows, the doorways, anywhere a person might try to hide from the weather. I felt a rising panic. I had pushed her to do this. I had told her to trust the art, to trust the process. I had told her to trust a man who had proved he was heartless. This was my fault. I found her about a block away, huddled under the awning of a closed laundromat. She was soaked through, shivering, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was trying to make herself as small as possible, to disappear. The torn copy of my book lay in a puddle beside her, the pages swollen and ruined. My heart broke. I approached slowly, like you would a stray dog you don't want to spook. "Lenny?" She looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes empty. The fire I'd seen on stage was gone, replaced by a deep, hollowed-out cold. "He told me I was garbage," she whispered, her voice raw. "He said I was filth, that I was desecrating his stage." I knelt in front of her, the wet concrete soaking through the knee of my pants. I didn't care. I reached into my pocket and pulled out all the cash I had on me. It was a few $100s. I pushed it into her cold, trembling hand. "No," she said, trying to pull away. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity," I said, my voice firm but gentle. I closed her fingers around the money. "It's an advance for the work we're about to do. You're going to get a room for a few nights, get dry, get warm, eat something hot, and then you and I are going to get to work." She stared at me, confused. "Work? What are you talking about? It's over." "No, it's not," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. I needed her to see that I meant it. He made a mistake, a big one, and we're going to make him see it. I promise you, Lenny, before this is over, you are going to stand on that stage and everyone is going to see exactly who you are. It was a crazy promise for a janitor to make, but she didn't see a janitor. In the dim light, under that leaky awning, she saw someone who believed her. A tiny flicker of hope returned to her eyes. She clutched the money and gave me a small, shaky nod. I gave her the address of a small, clean hotel a few blocks away and told her to meet me at a diner across the street from it the next morning. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then I walked back to the theater, the promise I made echoing in my head. I had just committed to something I had no idea how to accomplish. I had tied my fate to hers. The next morning, I found Ronan in the lobby. He was on the phone, laughing with some donor. He looked rested and content, not like a man who had brutalized a young girl the night before. When he saw me, he ended his call and gave me that same friendly smile from before. "Dan, my man, just the person I wanted to see," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I had to force myself not to flinch. "Mr. Graves, I need a special favor. We've got the board of directors coming in for a walkthrough this afternoon. I want this place to shine. I mean every piece of brass, every inch of wood. Make it look like a palace." "Of course," I said, my voice flat. I took a breath. "Mr. Graves, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "That girl yesterday, the one who came in for the last audition, I saw you talking to her in the alley." I chose my words carefully. She had a powerful voice. Ronan's friendly mask dissolved. His eyes went cold. "Let me give you some advice, Dan. Stick to your mops. Casting is my world. You have no idea what's at stake here." I just thought. "You thought what?" He cut me off, his voice sharp. That we should let a homeless person with mental problems be the face of our grand reopening? Our investors are putting millions into this theater. They expect a certain level of professionalism, of class. They are not investing in a charity case. That girl was a liability, a security threat. I did what I had to do to protect this theater, to protect all of our jobs, including yours. There it was, his motivation. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a twisted kind of pragmatism.
In his mind, he was the hero of the story, protecting the temple of art from the unclean masses. He saw Lenny not as a person, but as a problem that could cost him his funding, his reputation. He honestly believed he was doing the right thing, and that made him infinitely more dangerous. He looked me up and down, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Why are you so interested in her anyway?" I had to think fast. "She just reminded me of my niece," I lied. "A good kid who's had a tough run of it." His face softened slightly, but the suspicion didn't leave his eyes. "Well, this world is full of tough stories. Doesn't mean they belong on my stage. Now, about that brass." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with the smell of my own helplessness. My simple question had put me on his radar. Now I wasn't just the invisible janitor, I was the janitor who asked too many questions. Every move I made from now on would be watched. As I polished the handrails in the grand staircase, I thought back to the day I interviewed Ronan. I had been so impressed by his resume, his smooth talk about artistic integrity. But now I remembered other things. I remembered how his eyes lit up when he talked about the fundraising gala, not the plays. I remembered him spending more time discussing the wine list for the VIP lounge than the lighting design for the stage. The clues had all been there. I had just refused to see them because I was so desperate for someone else to carry the burden, to reignite the fire I had lost. I had hired a businessman, not an artist. And now a girl with more talent in her little finger than Ronan ought in his whole body was paying the price for my mistake. I met Lenny at the diner as planned. She looked like a different person. She had showered, her hair was clean, and she was wearing a new sweatshirt she must have bought. She was eating a plate of pancakes, slowly, like she was savoring every bite. The hunted look in her eyes was gone. I sat down across from her. "How was the hotel?" "Quiet," she said. "I haven't slept in a real bed in a long time." We sat in silence for a minute. Then she looked at me, her gaze steady. "Why are you doing this, Dan? Really?" I owed her more than a lie about a niece. I owed her a piece of the truth. Because I know what it feels like to have something inside you that needs to get out. And I know what it feels like when the world tells you to keep it hidden. A long time ago, I let my fire go out. Seeing you on that stage, it reminded me of what matters. You reminded me. She seemed to accept that. "Okay," she said. "So what's the plan? You said we were going to work." "We are," I said, leaning forward. "Ronan is never going to give you a fair shot, so we're not going to ask him for one. We're going to prepare you for a role so completely, so perfectly, that he has no choice. There's a final callback next week. It's for the investors and the board. He thinks he has his roles already, a girl with a famous last name. We're going to hijack it." Her eyes widened. "How?" "I'm going to coach you," I said, "every day, in secret. We'll find places to work, old churches, community centers, anywhere we can be alone. We are going to work on that monologue until it is a part of your soul. And on the day of the callback, you are going to walk onto that stage and you are going to show them what real talent looks like." It was a reckless, impossible plan. It could get us both thrown in jail. It could ruin everything. But as I looked at the determined set of her jaw, at the spark that was once again lit in her eyes, I knew it was the only way. We were no longer just a janitor and a homeless girl. We were a team. A secret alliance formed under the buzzing fluorescent lights of a cheap diner. And we had just declared war. Our first rehearsal space was the boiler room. It was deep in the theater's guts, a place of hot pipes and humming machinery. No one ever came down here. It smelled of dust and hot metal. I cleared a small space between two giant furnaces. This was our stage. "Okay," I said, trying to sound encouraging. "Let's start with Rose's monologue, the one where she tells Troy he takes and never gives." Lenny stood in the small cleared space, her arms wrapped around herself. The new sweatshirt couldn't hide how small she was. She stared at the concrete floor. She didn't say a word. "Lenny," I prompted gently. "I can't," she whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. When I try to say the words, all I see is his face, his mouth, saying those things. Ronan had done more than just throw her out. He had put a poison in her head. He had made her doubt the one thing she had in this world, her voice. I knew I couldn't push her. I wasn't a director right now. I was just Dan. "Okay," I said. "No lines. Let's forget the play. Let's talk about you. Tell me about those wooden birds you carve." She looked up, surprised.
"How do you know about those?" "I found one in the orchestra pit a while back. It was beautiful." A little bit of the tension left her shoulders. "My dad taught me how," she said, her voice a little stronger. "He was a carpenter. He could make anything out of wood. He said every piece of wood has a secret inside it. You just have to be patient enough to find it." "He sounds like a good man." "He was," she said, and then her face closed up again. "He's gone." We stood there in the humming silence of the boiler room. I realized I was trying to direct a performance, but the real work was just getting her to feel safe enough to breathe. "Let's try this," I said. "Forget the words on the page. Just stand there. And I want you to think about a time someone made a promise to you and broke it. A big promise. Don't say anything. Just feel it. Feel what that does to your body. Where does the anger sit? Is it in your hands? Your stomach?" She closed her eyes. Her whole body tensed. Her hands slowly, unconsciously clenched into tight fists at her sides. Her breathing got shallow. I could see it. I could see the memory playing out behind her eyes. After a full minute, a single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "There," I whispered. "That's Rose. That's where the truth begins." The next day, I was buffing the lobby floors when Ronan came in with two people in expensive suits. They were board members. I recognized them from the photos in the annual report I'd read before I bought the place. Ronan was in his element, a conductor leading his orchestra. "And as you can see, the renovations are proceeding perfectly," he said, his voice booming with false confidence. He gestured around the lobby, my freshly polished lobby. "We are creating a world-class experience from the moment our patrons walk through the door." He walked right past me, not even a glance in my direction. I was part of the scenery. I kept my head down, pushing the buffer, listening. "And the casting for Fences?" one of the board members asked. "A triumph," Ronan said smoothly. "I found the most incredible young woman to play Rose. Her name is Portia Vance. Her father is a major Broadway producer. She has the look, the training, the pedigree. She is going to be a star. The critics are going to adore her." He was selling them a brand, not an actress. He was selling them safety. He was taking my money, my dream, and turning it into a soulless product with a famous name attached. A rage, cold and quiet, simmered inside me. He was getting all the credit for my sacrifice, and he was using it to bury the very kind of artist I had hoped to find. That night, back in the boiler room, Lenny was struggling again. She could find the feeling, but the words still wouldn't come out right. They sounded forced, like she was trying to recite a poem. "It's not working, Dan," she said, her voice full of frustration. She slumped down onto an overturned bucket. "I'm not good enough." "That's not true," I said, but the words felt empty. I needed to show her, not just tell her.
I sat down on another bucket across from her. "Let me tell you a story," I said. "My first big audition. I was about your age. I had this monologue memorized backwards and forwards. I had practiced it in front of the mirror 1,000 times. I walked into the room, and the director was this famous, important guy. I was terrified. I opened my mouth, and nothing. Not a single word came out. My mind was completely blank. I just stood there, sweating, for what felt like an hour. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I ran," I said with a small, sad laugh. I literally turned and ran out of the room. I was so ashamed. I went home and I told myself I was done. I wasn't cut out for it. I was a fraud. "So what changed?" she asked, leaning in. "My mother," I said. "She found me sitting in my room. She didn't yell at me. She just said, 'The fear is supposed to be there. It's part of it. The fear means you care. Don't run from it. Use it. Make the fear part of the story.'" The next day, I went back. I apologized, and I did the monologue again. But this time, I didn't try to be perfect. I let them see the fear, and I got the part. I looked at her. "Ronan made you afraid. Don't run from it. Use it. Put all that fear, all that anger at him into the words. Rose is afraid. She is furious. You know how that feels. Show them." "There," I whispered. "That's Rose. That's where the truth begins." The next day, the hope felt like it was miles away. I was taking a short break in the alley, just trying to get some fresh air, when I saw Lenny across the street. She was waiting for me, ready for our next secret rehearsal. I gave her a small nod, a signal to wait. Just then, a stagehand named Sal, a guy I'd shared a few coffees with, came out for a smoke. "Hey, Dan," he said, lighting a cigarette. He glanced across the street and saw Lenny. "That's that girl from the other day, right? The one Graves gave the boot?" "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Tough situation." "Looks like you know her," he said, taking a drag. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. "I've talked to her a couple of times. She's just a kid having a hard time." "Yeah, well, be careful," Sal said, blowing out a cloud of smoke. "Graves is wound tight about the board being here. He sees anything out of place, he snaps. Just looking out for you, man." He meant well, but his friendly warning felt like a nail being hammered into my coffin. People were noticing. I wasn't as invisible as I thought. An hour later, my fear was confirmed. Ronan cornered me while I was cleaning the second-floor restrooms. He didn't come in yelling. He came in smiling, which was far more terrifying. "Dan," he said, leaning against the doorframe, blocking my only exit. "We need to talk." "Sir?" I said, my heart starting to pound. My hands felt slick on the mop handle. "Sal mentioned you've been speaking with the girl I had removed from the premises," he said. His voice was calm, reasonable. "He said you seemed to have taken an interest in her." I opened my mouth to lie, to say it was nothing, but he held up a hand. "Look, I get it. You have a good heart. You see someone in trouble and you want to help. I admire that. I really do." He took a step closer. The smell of his expensive cologne filled the small room. "But I cannot have my staff engaging with individuals who pose a potential security risk. It's a liability I can't afford, especially not right now. Do you understand?" I was trapped. He was being so reasonable, so professional. He was the boss, concerned for his theater and his employee. "Yes, sir," I managed to say. "Good," he said, his smile tightening. "Because if I hear that you've had any more contact with her, I'll have to assume you don't have the theater's best interests at heart, and I'll have to let you go immediately. We clear?" The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He was cutting me off from her. He was isolating me, using my job, my cover, against me. If I lost my access to the theater, the plan was dead. Everything we had worked for would be for nothing. Lenny would be back on the street, her fire extinguished for good.
I had no choice. "Crystal clear, Mr. Graves," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. He clapped me on the shoulder, the gesture feeling more like a punch. "Excellent. I knew you were a smart man, Dan." He turned and left. I stood alone in the silence of the empty restroom, the smell of bleach and his cologne making me sick. I was being watched. My cover was blown. The final callback was in 2 days, and I had just been forbidden from ever speaking to my star actress again. I felt like a man in a cage. Ronan had locked the door and slid the key just out of reach. My connection to Lenny was severed. I couldn't coach her, encourage her, couldn't even tell her to be careful. Every time I swept a hallway or cleaned a mirror, I felt Ronan's eyes on me, even when he wasn't there. Sal's friendly warning had turned into a threat that echoed in my head. He sees anything out of place, he snaps. For an entire day, I was paralyzed. I did my job on autopilot, my mind racing. How could I reach her? How could I warn her that Ronan was watching me, and by extension, watching for her? The callback was tomorrow. If she showed up, Ronan wouldn't just turn her away this time. He would see it as a direct challenge from me, the meddling janitor. He might call the police. He might have her arrested for trespassing. My attempt to give her a stage could end up putting her in a cell. The thought made me sick. I had to get a message to her. I couldn't go to the hotel I'd sent her to. That was the first place Ronan would look if he was truly suspicious. The diner was a risk, but it was the only one I had left. That night, long after the last of the crew had gone home, I slipped out of the theater. The city air felt heavy. Every person I passed on the street felt like one of Ronan's spies. I walked the 3 blocks to the diner, my shoulders hunched, my janitor's jacket pulled tight. The same waitress was working the late shift. She recognized me and gave me a tired smile. I ordered a coffee I didn't want. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low. "The girl I was here with the other morning, Lenny, if she comes in, can you give her a message for me?" The waitress raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?"
Yeah, just tell her Dan said to stay away from the theater tomorrow. Tell her it's not safe. Tell her I have a new plan, and I'll find her. Can you do that?" I slid a $20 bill across the counter. She pushed it back toward me. "Keep your money. If I see her, I'll tell her." She looked at me with a hint of concern. "You two in some kind of trouble?" "Something like that," I said. I thanked her and left, the coffee untouched. I felt a small bit of relief. It was a flimsy net, but it was the only one I could cast. When I got back to the theater, the building was quiet except for the low hum of the ventilation system. I started on my final rounds, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty spaces. As I made my way to the executive offices on the 3rd floor, I saw a light on under Ronan's door. It wasn't unusual for him to work late, but tonight it sent a chill down my spine. I was about to turn and head back downstairs when I heard his voice, amplified slightly. He was on a speakerphone. I froze, pressing myself into the shadows of the hallway. "The board was eating out of my hand," Ronan was saying, his voice thick with self-satisfaction. "They bought the whole story, the rising costs, the unforeseen construction delays. They're primed for the bad news." A different voice, tinny and distorted through the phone's speaker, replied, "And the season ticket sales?" "Pathetic," Ronan said with a laugh. "Portia Vance has the name, but she has 0 draw, exactly as we planned. By the time the show opens and the reviews come out, we'll be bleeding money so fast, the board will be begging to unload this place." My blood went cold. What was he talking about? "Just make sure the final report looks legitimate," the voice on the phone said. "I've got the investors lined up, ready to buy the property the second the theater declares insolvency. They won't even look twice at the price. They just want the land." The land. They weren't talking about saving the theater. They were talking about selling it. Ronan's voice dropped, becoming more conspiratorial. "They won't. My projections show a catastrophic loss. No one in their right mind would try to save it. They'll be grateful to get out from under it. A year from now, this temple of art will be the foundation for the tallest condo building on the block. My blood went cold. What was he talking about? Just make sure the final report looks legitimate, the voice on the phone said. I've got the investors lined up, ready to buy the property the second the theater declares insolvency. They won't even look twice at the price. They just want the land. The land. They weren't talking about saving the theater. They were talking about selling it. Ronan's voice dropped, becoming more conspiratorial. They won't. My projections show a catastrophic loss. No one in their right mind would try to save it. They'll be grateful to get out from under it. A year from now, this temple of art will be the foundation for the tallest condo building on the block. I had to put my hand against the wall to keep from falling over. It wasn't just a bad business decision. It was a conspiracy. Ronan wasn't trying to make my theater a success. He was a saboteur. He had been hired by a real estate developer to intentionally run my theater into the ground so they could buy the building for nothing and tear it down. All my money, my dream of preserving this historic place, it was all just a game to him. I wasn't his employer. I was his target. The man I had trusted with my legacy was actively, systematically destroying it from the inside. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, it felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What about Washington?" the man on the phone asked. The sound of my own name hit me like a physical blow. "What about him?" Ronan scoffed. "He's off somewhere writing his memoirs, trying to find his soul." He handed me the keys and walked away. By the time he figures out what happened, the bulldozers will be warming up. He wanted to build a legacy, and I'm going to give him one, the most expensive pile of rubble in the city. I felt a white-hot rage build in my chest, so intense it made me dizzy. He was using my own desire to reconnect with my art as the weapon to destroy it. I wanted to kick the door in, to grab him by his custom-tailored collar and what? Reveal myself? Dan the janitor suddenly claiming to be the owner? They'd have me committed. Then the conversation took a turn that made my heart stop. "Are you sure you have everything under control? No loose ends?" "Just one small thing," Ronan said, and I could hear the irritation in his tone. "I've got this janitor, Dan, the one I told you about. He's been asking questions about that homeless girl. I think he might be more than he looks. A union guy, maybe? Or a reporter sniffing around for a sob story. I'm having him followed, just in case, keeping a log of his movements." He was having me followed. The paranoia I'd felt walking to the diner wasn't just in my head. It was real. They were watching me. My cover wasn't just thin, it was non-existent. I was a bug under his microscope. "A janitor," the man on the phone said with disbelief. "It doesn't matter," Ronan said dismissively. "He's a nobody. And the girl is no longer a problem. I made sure of it." "What did you do?" "The janitor was stupid enough to put her up in a cheap hotel nearby. I had a word with the manager. Told him she was an unstable fan who had been stalking one of my actresses, that we were concerned for our safety. They had their security escort her off the premises this afternoon and told her if she was seen in the neighborhood again, they'd call the cops. She's gone. Vanished. Problem solved." The words hit me harder than any of the rest. I stumbled back from the door, my breath catching in my throat. My message at the diner was useless. She was already gone. I hadn't just failed to protect her, I had led him right to her. My money, my attempt to give her one safe mite, had been the very thing that put her in more danger. I had made her a target. I had gotten her chased out of the one area where she had a fragile lifeline. Me. I thought of her face in the alley, the hollow look in her eyes. I thought of the promise I had made. I'll find a way. I had promised to be her champion, and instead, I had become her betrayer. Ronan hadn't just thrown her out of the theater, he had used me to exile her from her own life. Ronan hung up the phone. I heard his chair scrape against the floor. I couldn't be found here. I forced my legs to move, stumbling down the hallway in the dark, my mind a roaring chaos of fury and shame. I made it to my supply closet and collapsed against the door, sliding down to the floor. Everything was gone. Lenny was gone, cast out into the city because of my foolishness. My cover was destroyed. My theater was a lie, a shell being hollowed out for profit. Ronan wasn't just an obstacle, he was a monster wearing a friendly mask, and I had handed him the knife myself. I was trapped. I was no longer Denzel Washington, the powerful actor. I wasn't even Dan, the invisible janitor. I was just a fool who had lost everything before he even knew he was in a fight. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant, completely and utterly alone. And for the first time, I had no idea what to do next. For a long time, I just sat there on the floor of the supply closet, my back pressed against the metal shelving. The rage had burned out, leaving behind a cold, heavy ash in my stomach. It wasn't just that Ronan was a liar and a thief. It was that he had used my own hope against me. He had taken my desire to find something real and twisted it into a tool for his own greed. He was right. I had just handed him the keys. And Lenny, the thought of her was a physical pain, a sharp pressure behind my eyes. I had made her a promise. I had told her I would protect her. Instead, I had painted a target on her back. I had led Ronan's cruelty right to her doorstep. My money, my help, my mentorship, it had all been a curse. I pictured her being thrown out of that hotel room, the one place she had felt safe, and being told the police would be called if she ever came back. She was alone again, but this time it was worse. This time she was being hunted, all because she had trusted a janitor named Dan. Sleep didn't come that night. I just lay on the lumpy cot in my small rented room, staring at the ceiling. Every option I ran through in my head led to a dead end. If I exposed myself, Ronan would use his log of my movements to paint me as an unstable man obsessed with a homeless girl. The media would have a field day. Denzel Washington loses his mind. The story would become about me, not the theater, not the fraud. The developers would use the scandal to accelerate their plans, and Lenny would be caught in the crossfire, her trauma turned into tabloid fodder. If I stayed as Dan, I was nothing, a janitor who had been warned to stay in his lane, a man being watched. I was completely and totally powerless. I had walked into this building thinking I was a king in disguise, but I was just a fool in a boiler suit. Ronan had outplayed me at every turn. The next morning, the theater felt different. It felt like a funeral home. It was the day of the final callback, the showcase for the board. The air was thick with a false excitement. I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn stain near the entrance, when she walked in. Portia Vance. She was exactly as I had pictured. Tall, thin, dressed in expensive but simple clothes. She carried herself with an air of bored confidence. She didn't have to fight for her place here. It had been given to her. She looked right through me, her eyes scanning the lobby for Ronan. He appeared a moment later, his arms open wide. "Portia, darling, you look wonderful." He kissed her on both cheeks. "Are you ready to make history?" She said, "I was born ready, Ronan," her voice smooth and polished, without a single rough edge. I kept my head down, scrubbing the same spot over and over. This was the woman who was taking Lenny's place. This was the face of Ronan's lie. A comfortable, predictable, passionless lie. During my lunch hour, I couldn't stop myself.
I had to try. I left the theater and walked the streets, my heart pounding with a desperate, foolish hope. I checked the soup kitchen a few blocks away.
I walked under the freeway overpass where people gathered for shelter from the sun. I scanned every face in the crowds, looking for her. But she was gone. It was like she had never existed. The whole time I felt eyes on my back. A man reading a newspaper on a bench. A woman talking on her phone across the street. Were they Ronan's people, or was I just losing my mind? It didn't matter. The result was the same. She was gone. The city had swallowed her whole, and I was the one who had pushed her into its mouth. I got back to the theater just as the callback was starting. My job was to clean the outer lobby and the hallways, to keep everything perfect for the board members. The heavy doors to the main stage were closed, but I could hear them. I heard Ronan give a glowing introduction for Portia. Then silence, and then the words began. "I've been standing with you. I've been right here with you, Troy." Portia's voice was clear. Every word was pronounced perfectly. Her rhythm was flawless. It was technically brilliant, and it was completely empty. There was no pain in it, no history, no rage. It was like listening to a machine read the most heartbreaking words ever written. I thought of Lenny in the boiler room, her fists clenched, tears streaming down her face as she tore those same words from her soul. This wasn't art. This was imitation. This was a lie. I had to lean my mop against the wall and put my hand over my mouth to keep from being sick. After she finished, there was a polite, sustained applause from inside. The doors opened, and the board members came out, smiling. Ronan was right behind them, his face glowing with triumph. "A star is born," one of the board members said, shaking Ronan's hand. "You've done it again, Graves." "The pleasure is all mine," Ronan said, his eyes scanning the hallway. He saw me standing there, by my bucket. He walked over, the board members trailing behind him. He stopped right in front of me, his smile never wavering. "An incredible talent, wouldn't you agree, Dan?" he asked, his voice just loud enough for only me to hear the challenge in it. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He looked me in the eye, and for a second, the friendly mask dropped. I saw a flash of pure, cold victory. He knew he had won. He knew that I knew, and he was enjoying it. "Good," he said, his public smile returning. He turned to the group. "Let's retire to my office for a champagne toast to our new Rose." As they walked away, he looked back over his shoulder. "Oh, and Dan," he called out, "I need you to handle something personally. Miss Vance's new dressing room, the Star Suite. I want it made spotless. She'll be moving her things in tomorrow. She represents the future of this theater. Let's make her feel welcome." It was the final humiliation. He was forcing me to prepare the sacred space, the one I had pictured for Lenny, for her replacement. He was making me an accomplice in my own defeat. I didn't answer. I just watched him walk away. I grabbed my bucket and my mop and made my way backstage. The Star dressing room was at the end of the hall. It had a gold star on the door. My hands were shaking so much I could barely turn the knob. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was a beautiful room, with a large mirror surrounded by lights and a small, comfortable couch. This was supposed to be Lenny's sanctuary. This was where she was supposed to prepare, to transform. This was where her new life was supposed to begin. I stood in the middle of the room, the mop handle feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. It was over. I had lost. I hadn't just lost a building. I had lost the fire that Lenny had reignited inside me. I had lost the one chance I had to make a real difference, to pull one incredible talent out of the darkness. All that was left was a quiet, empty room and the crushing weight of my failure. Ronan hadn't just beaten me, he had erased me. I wasn't Denzel Washington anymore. I wasn't even Dan the janitor. I was just the man who had to clean the room where a dream had died. And I had no one to blame but myself. I dropped the mop. It clattered against the floor, the sound echoing in the perfect silence of the room. I didn't care. I walked over to the large, brightly lit mirror and stared at my reflection. I didn't see an actor. I didn't see a man who had won awards or commanded stages. I saw a tired old man in a gray janitor's uniform, a man with hollow eyes and a defeated slump in his shoulders. Ronan hadn't just beaten me, he had shown me who I really was. A ghost, an imposter in my own life. This whole experiment, this search for truth, had been a fool's errand. The truth was that I was powerless. The uniform wasn't a disguise, it was a mirror. I sank down onto the small couch, the one meant for a star, and buried my face in my hands. The smell of lemon polish and disinfectant filled my nose. This was my legacy, the smell of failure. I thought about just walking away. I could leave the keys on the desk, disappear, and let Ronan and his partners tear the place down. Let them turn it into another glass tower that blocked out the sun. What did it matter? The fire I was trying to find was gone for good. They had all won. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over my lawyer's number. One call and I could start the process of cutting my losses. Sell the building, take the financial hit, and retreat back to my safe, empty life. But I couldn't press the button. My finger moved on its own, scrolling to a different name. Pauletta, my wife. The one person who had always been able to see right through me, whether I was playing a character or just playing a fool. She answered on the second ring. "Denzel, is everything all right?" She knew my voice, even when I felt like a stranger to myself. "No," I said, my own voice sounding broken and weak. "Everything is not all right." "Talk to me," she said. Not with pity, but with a firm, steady calm that had been my anchor for decades. So I told her. I told her everything. About being Dan, about finding Lenny, about the boiler room rehearsals, and about Ronan. I told her about the phone call I overheard, the conspiracy to destroy the theater, and how he had used my own plan to get Lenny thrown out onto the street. As I spoke the words out loud, the shame washed over me in a fresh wave. It sounded even worse than it had in my head. It sounded pathetic. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought maybe she was disappointed. Maybe she finally saw me the way I saw myself in the mirror. "So, you're going to quit?" she said finally. It wasn't a question. "What else can I do?" I asked, the desperation leaking into my voice. "He has me watched. He's twisted the whole story. If I come forward, they'll say I'm crazy. And Lenny, I don't even know where she is. It's over." "The Denzel Washington I married would never say that," she said. "The man I married didn't become who he is by giving up when a bully in a nice suit tried to push him around. You told me you went there to find a fire. Well, I hear it in your voice right now. It's not gone. It just changed. It's not a stage light anymore. It's a furnace. You're angry. Good. Use it." "How?" I whispered. "He's in control of everything." "No, he's not," she said firmly. "He's in control of the theater, but you are in control of the truth. You said he keeps a log of your movements, that he has reports to fake the theater's losses. You think a man that arrogant just keeps that in his head? No, he writes it down. He has proof. He's a businessman, and businessmen leave a paper trail. You've been playing the part of a weak janitor for so long, you've forgotten how to think like the man you actually are. You are smarter than him, Denzel. You just have to remember it." Her words cut through the fog of my despair. She wasn't telling me what to do. She was reminding me of who I was.
I had been so focused on what Dan the janitor couldn't do that I had forgotten everything Denzel Washington could. I wasn't just a man with a mop. I was a man who had built a career on understanding people, on finding their weaknesses, on knowing how to dismantle a character from the inside out. And Ronan Graves was the most predictable character of them all. A greedy, arrogant man who thought he was untouchable. "You're right," I said, a new strength hardening my voice. The slump in my shoulders straightened. "I know I'm right," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice now. "And Denzel, that girl, Lenny, you find her. You made that girl a promise, and in our house, a promise is not a small thing." "I will," I said, and for the first time in days, I believed it. "I love you." "I love you too," she said. "Now, go get to work." I hung up the phone and stood up. I walked back to the mirror. The man looking back at me was different now. The uniform was the same, but the eyes were not. The hollowness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. Pauletta was right. I had been playing a part. Now it was time for that part to end. It was time to stop reacting and start directing. My mind started to race, pieces clicking into place. Ronan's office, the log, the financial projections. Everything I needed to expose him was probably sitting in a file on his computer or locked in his desk drawer. He felt safe. He thought I was a nobody. He thought Lenny was gone. That was his weakness. He was underestimating his enemy. I knew his schedule. He came in at 9 and left around 7. After that, the only people in the building were the late shift cleaning crew and the single security guard who mostly sat in the front lobby watching videos on his phone. And I had something Ronan didn't know I had. I had the master keys. As the owner, I had insisted on a set for myself before this whole thing started.
They were hidden in the false bottom of my locker in the janitor's lounge. They opened every door in the building, including his. The choice was simple. There was no choice at all. I could stay broken, let him win, and live with the shame for the rest of my life. Or I could fight back. I could risk everything, my reputation, my safety, my freedom, on one desperate gamble to uncover the truth. If I got caught breaking into his office, I'd be arrested. Ronan's story about the unstable janitor would become a fact. But if I did nothing, I was already in a prison of my own making. I picked up my mop. The wood felt different in my hands. It wasn't a tool of defeat anymore. It was part of my cover, my alibi. I spent the next hour cleaning that dressing room, making it spotless, just as he had asked. But I wasn't cleaning it for Portia Vance. I was wiping away my own failure. With every swipe of the cloth, I was erasing the man who had given up. I was preparing the ground for a battle. That night, I waited. I did my usual rounds, emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms, nodding to the security guard as he settled in for the night. I watched the last of the crew members clock out. At precisely 1 in the morning, when the building was at its quietest, I went to my locker. My heart was a steady, heavy drum in my chest. I retrieved the keys. They were cold and solid in my hand. I walked through the silent, sleeping theater. The ghosts of past performances felt different tonight. They weren't judging me. They were watching, waiting. I climbed the grand staircase to the 3rd floor. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency exit signs. I reached his office door. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the building around me. This was it, the point of no return. I was no longer an actor playing a janitor. I was a man about to risk it all for a girl with a voice and a theater with a soul. I slid the key into the lock. The quiet click as the tumblers turned was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The office was dark, smelling of leather and Ronan's self-satisfaction. My flashlight cut a nervous beam across the polished desk. The computer was asleep, a single pulsing light in the gloom. I touched the mouse, and the screen came to life, demanding a password. My mind raced. What would a man like Ronan use? Something arrogant, something obvious. I typed his last name, Graves. Nothing. I typed the theater's name. Nothing. I thought about his speech to me in the lobby, about building a temple. I typed the word temple. The screen unlocked. My breath escaped in a shaky sigh. His ego was my key. I found the files almost immediately. He hadn't even bothered to hide them. A folder on his desktop was labeled Project Legacy. Inside were the 2 sets of books, one showing the real, modest losses of a theater in its first year. The other was a work of fiction, a catastrophic financial bleed designed to scare any investor into running for the hills. There were emails too, a long chain between Ronan and a developer, outlining the entire scheme. They talked about my sabbatical, my gullibility. They laid out the plan to buy the land for pennies on the dollar once the theater I loved was declared a failure. I felt a cold, clean rage replace my fear. This wasn't just business, it was personal. I plugged in the small USB drive I'd brought and began copying the files. Every click of the mouse felt like a hammer blow against his deception. As the files transferred, I saw another folder. This one was just labeled HR. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. There was one file inside, Janitor. It was his log, a detailed, date-stamped account of my movements, my conversations with Sal, my trips to the diner, my meeting with Lenny under the laundromat awning, the report from the hotel manager. He had documented everything. It was creepy, invasive, and the best piece of evidence I could have asked for. It proved his obsession, his paranoia. It showed he wasn't just protecting the theater, he was stalking an employee. Then I found the last thing, a subfolder of security footage. I clicked on one. It was the alley. The timestamp was from the night of Lenny's audition. My heart stopped when I saw the little speaker icon. This one had audio. I put in the cheap earbuds from my pocket and pressed play. I heard it all. Ronan's voice, dripping with contempt. You are filth. You are a disease. He called her garbage. He told her she was nothing. Hearing the words, the sheer venom behind them, was 100 times worse than just seeing it. I saved the video. It was the last file to finish copying. I pulled the drive out just as I heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. My blood turned to ice. They were coming back. The board, Ronan. I heard his laugh echoing down the corridor. I had nowhere to go. My eyes darted around the room. The door, a tall window with a long drop, and a small, narrow closet behind his desk where he hung his coats. It was my only shot. I scrambled over, slipped inside, and pulled the door shut, leaving it open just a crack. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I was sure they could hear it. The office door swung open. The lights flickered on, blinding me for a second. Ronan's voice filled the room, loud and triumphant. A toast to Portia Vance, our new star, and to a new era of success at the August Wilson Theater. I heard the pop of a cork, the clink of glasses. Through the crack in the door, I saw him, the smiling king in his castle, handing glasses to the board members. He was standing not 5 feet from where I was hiding. "A brilliant choice, Ronan," the chairman said. "She has a certain polish, very marketable." "She is the future," Ronan said, raising his glass. "She represents the class and prestige that will make this theater the envy of the city."
He was so full of it, so completely convinced of his own victory. He thought the game was over. He had no idea the real final act was about to begin. I took a deep breath. My wife's voice was in my head. Use it. I pushed the closet door open and stepped out into the light. The sound of clinking glasses stopped. Every head turned. 6 pairs of eyes, all wide with shock and confusion, stared at me. I was just Dan, the janitor, standing there in my worn gray uniform, holding a dust rag. Ronan was the first to recover. His face went from shock to a dark, dangerous red. "What in the hell are you doing in here?" he snarled. "I told you to clean the dressing room. Get out, now." He took a step toward me, his hand reaching for the phone on his desk. "Security will handle this." "I don't think so," I said, my voice calm and even. It felt good to use my own voice again, without the quiet humility of Dan. I held up the small USB drive so they could all see it. "I think you and the board might want to see what's on this drive before you make any calls." I walked past him, toward the large monitor on his wall. He was too stunned to stop me. I plugged the drive in. The board members exchanged nervous glances. "Ronan, what is this?" the chairman asked. "He's insane," Ronan sputtered. "He's a disgruntled employee I was about to fire. He's been obsessed with some homeless girl." I ignored him. I clicked open the first file. The email chain with the developer filled the screen. I gave them a moment to read it. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. I saw the chairman's face drain of all color. "Next," I said, and I pulled up the 2 financial reports side by side, the real one and the fake one. The lie was so clear, so undeniable. Ronan lunged for the computer, but the chairman put a hand on his chest, stopping him. "Let him finish, Ronan." "And this," I said, my voice dropping, "is how Mr. Graves treats the real talent he claims to be looking for." I played the video. The audio filled the room. His hateful, vicious words echoed off the expensive wood paneling. No one moved. No one breathed. They were all frozen, forced to witness the ugliness he had tried to keep in the dark. Portia Vance, who had been standing in the corner, looked pale and sick. Ronan looked like a man who had been shot. This is taken out of context. She was a threat. I was protecting the theater." "Were you protecting the theater when you had me followed?" I asked, clicking on the last file. The log of my movements appeared on the screen, detailing every step I had taken outside the building. Just then, there was a firm knock on the office door. Before anyone could answer, it opened. Sal, the stagehand, stood there, and beside him, holding her head high, was Lenny. She wasn't wearing rags. She was in a simple, clean dress Sal must have helped her buy. The fear was gone from her eyes. All that was left was a quiet, burning strength. I had called Sal from the boiler room after I spoke to my wife. I told him everything, and I'd bet on his decency. I told him which shelter to check. The one I knew was just outside the zone Ronan had cleared. I had asked him to bring her here. I had gambled that she would trust me one last time. And she had. I turned away from the screen and looked at the board members. "You just applauded a very polished performance. Now I want to show you an artist." I looked at Lenny. I didn't have to say a word. She knew. She walked to the center of the room, took a deep breath, and she began. "I've been standing with you. I've been right here with you, Troy." The words weren't just spoken. They were torn out of her. The pain, the betrayal, the love, the rage. It was all there, in her voice, in her eyes, in the clenching of her fists. It was the performance of a lifetime, delivered in a corporate office with no stage and no lights. It was pure, undeniable truth.
When she finished, a warm, inspirational silence fell over the room. It wasn't the polite silence after Portia's audition. It was a silence of awe, of shame. The board members looked at Lenny, then at Ronan, with expressions of complete and utter disgust. Ronan was broken. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, his grand plan turned to ash around him. I walked toward the chairman of the board. I looked him in the eye. "The name isn't Dan," I said, my voice clear and strong. "My name is Denzel Washington. I own this theater, and I am the man who made the mistake of hiring you, Mr. Graves." I turned to face Ronan. The look on his face, the slow dawning of horrified understanding, was something I would never forget. "And you are fired." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Ronan looked as if I had physically struck him. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and hit the thick carpet with a dull thud. For the first time since I'd met him, the smooth, confident mask was gone, and all that was left was a terrified, cornered little man. The chairman of the board, a man named Henderson who I knew had a reputation for being ruthless, was the first to move. He stepped away from Ronan as if the man was contagious. He turned to me, his face a mixture of shock and damage control. "Mr. Washington," he said, his voice a low rumble. "On behalf of the board, I had no idea. This is a complete betrayal of our trust, of your trust. We will cooperate fully with whatever you decide to do." He didn't even look at Ronan. He was already erasing him. The other board members followed his lead, murmuring their apologies, their outrage. They were rats, and the ship was sinking. Portia Vance, the actress Ronan had chosen, just quietly slipped out of the room. She knew a dead end when she saw one. My security team, who I had called and told to wait in the lobby, came in on cue. They were professionals, big men who moved with quiet purpose. They didn't put their hands on Ronan. They didn't have to. They just stood on either side of him. "Get his things," I said, my voice steady. "Escort him from the building. He is not to set foot on this property ever again. My lawyers will be in touch with him and with the police in the morning." Ronan finally found his voice, a pathetic, pleading whisper. "Denzel, please, we can talk about this. It was just a business proposal, a bad idea." I looked at him, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of pity. He still didn't get it. "You didn't just try to steal my money, Ronan," I said. "You tried to tear down a church. You tried to silence a voice like hers." I nodded toward Lenny, who stood watching, her expression unreadable. "There is nothing to talk about. Get out of my theater." They led him away. He didn't look back, and just like that, the poison was gone. Henderson cleared his throat. "Mr. Washington, we will begin proceedings immediately to—" "You'll do what I tell you to do," I cut him off, my tone leaving no room for argument. "For now, you will all go home. There will be a full investigation, and we will have a meeting tomorrow to discuss the future of this board." The unspoken threat was clear. Their jobs were on the line, and they knew it. They left quickly, their heads bowed. Finally, we were alone. Just me, Sal, and Lenny in the big, silent office. Sal looked at me, a grin spreading across his face. "Well, Dan," he said, shaking his head, "you are full of surprises." I laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in my chest. "You have no idea." Then I turned to Lenny. She was looking at the empty spot where Ronan had stood, her hands clasped in front of her. I walked over and stood in front of her. I wanted to say something grand, something worthy of the moment, but all I could manage was the simple truth. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry for what he did to you, and I'm sorry I put you in that position. I never should have let it happen." She looked up at me, and her eyes were clear. "You kept your promise, Dan," she said softly. Then she corrected herself. "Mr. Washington." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You can call me Denzel, and I have another promise to make. The role of Rose in Fences is yours, if you still want it." A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. It was the first time I had ever seen her truly smile, and it lit up the entire room. "I want it," she said. The weeks that followed were a blur of focused, joyful work. The story of Ronan's fraud and my undercover operation stayed contained for now. My lawyers worked quietly, dismantling his life and the developer's plans piece by piece. They found he had done this before on a smaller scale. He wasn't just a liar, it was his profession. Legal charges were filed, restitution was demanded. Ronan Graves would never work in this town or any other again. But all of that was just noise in the background. My real work was in the theater. I stepped in as the director for Fences. It felt right. Every day, I worked with Lenny on the main stage, out in the open, under the full, bright lights. I got her a safe, permanent apartment a few blocks away. I made sure she had a tutor to help her finish her high school education. I saw to it that she had everything she needed, not just to be an actress, but to be a kid who finally had a chance to feel secure. Watching her grow was like watching a time-lapse video of a flower blooming. With every rehearsal, she became more confident. She started to laugh. She made friends with the cast and crew, who had all heard the real story and treated her with a fierce, protective respect. She wasn't the ghost in the walls anymore. She was the heart of the building. And in coaching her, I found myself again. The long, empty feeling I'd had was gone. It was replaced by the excitement of creation, the joy of seeing a raw talent find its shape and power. Pauletta would come to rehearsal sometimes, watching from the back row. She'd catch my eye and just smile, that knowing smile that said everything. Opening night felt like the whole city was holding its breath. I stood in the wings, my heart pounding harder than it ever did for one of my own premieres. Lenny was standing beside me, looking out at the full house through a crack in the curtain. She wasn't nervous, she was electric. She was home. "Thank you," she whispered to me, not taking her eyes off the stage, "for seeing me." "Thank you," I said back, my voice thick with emotion, "for reminding me how to see." She went out there, and she didn't just play Rose, she became Rose. The audience was silent, captivated. In that final, devastating monologue, you could have heard a pin drop. She poured every bit of her own pain, her own survival, her own fight into those words. It was more than a performance. It was a testimony. When the curtain fell, there was a split second of stunned silence, and then the theater exploded. The applause was a physical force, a wave of love and recognition that washed over the stage. They gave her a standing ovation that lasted for 10 full minutes. I stood in the shadows of the wings and cried. I wasn't crying from sadness, I was crying from a place of profound gratitude. I had bought a building to save myself, but I had ended up saving something so much more important. The show was a massive success. The critics called Lenny a revelation, a once-in-a-generation talent. The theater, the one Ronan had tried to destroy, became the hottest ticket in town, celebrated for its raw, authentic voice. My legacy wasn't a pile of rubble. It was a sold-out theater and a brand new star. A few months later, I was sitting in the empty theater late one night, long after the show had ended. The ghost light cast its single, soft glow on the center of the stage. Lenny had just gotten a full scholarship to a prestigious acting school. She had a future, bright and full of promise. And I had my fire back. Being Dan the janitor, being invisible, had allowed me to see the world and myself clearly for the first time in years. I learned that you don't find truth under the bright lights of a premiere. You find it in the quiet, forgotten corners. You find it in the boiler room. You find it in the heart of a girl who refuses to be broken. It's funny how life works. Sometimes you have to lose everything you think you are to find out who you're truly meant to be. Thank you for being here with me tonight and for letting me share this part of my life with you. It's stories like this, stories about finding light in the darkest of places, that remind me why we do what we do. If this story touched you, I'd be so grateful if you'd give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more. It really does help. And I'd love to know what you think. What part of Lenny's journey resonated with you the most? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be reading them. I appreciate every single one of you. Stay safe out there, and remember to look for the magic in the unexpected places. You never know what you'll find. I'll see you next time with another story about a world hidden just beneath our own.